You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode with an amazing guest. Our guest today is Renée Warren, and she is an award-winning entrepreneur, inspirational speaker, author, and founder of the We Wild Women, a platform that helps women-led businesses build confidence and authority and gain industry recognition and the media exposure they deserve. She's also the host of the celebrated podcast Into the Wild, a show in the top 1.5% that features curated interviews with women entrepreneurs and provides actionable advice to women who are growing their own dream business. Renée firmly believes that the best advice comes from someone who has successfully done it before. Her approach to coaching comes from over 25 years of experience as an entrepreneur, in running marketing and PR agencies, and in being an unapologetic risk taker. When she's not coaching or podcasting, you can find Renée spending time with her family. In addition, she loves CrossFit, travel, and refining her drumming skills. Welcome, Renée.
Thanks for having me. I realize I need to update my bio. I'm like, I'm not coaching anymore, but actually before recording, you and I both established that I still do coaching. It's just in a different format.
That's right. It's still coaching. She was saying, I don't coach. And I said, well, what do you do? And then she told me what she did. And I said, yeah, that's coaching. Okay. So she's still a coach.
But it's not coaching like how you coach. It is coaching, but just a different way.
It's different format.
But thank you for calling that out, because I realized that I still do that.
Absolutely. It's just a different way. Okay. Renée, you have a fascinating story. So tell us, how did you get into PR? And you've had many businesses. So just walk us through how you got where you are right now.
Okay. Do you want the long story or the short story?
Well, it depends. How much time do we have here?
Right. Okay. So the quick story is, I'll give you a very brief timeline, is when I was 17 years old, my mom told me to go and get a job, because it was that time in your life you get a job. And I did that. I applied for jobs, and I hated the idea of having to work for somebody else. And I thought that being an entrepreneur meant that you didn't work a lot and you made a lot of money. And so this opportunity came up at this restaurant. It was a seasonal restaurant close to my house where I grew up in Northern Ontario in Canada, was available. And so my sister and I leased the place for 4 summers, and we ran this restaurant. And yes, we did end up making a lot of money, because if you are kind of buying into an already established business that has revenue, mind you, this was like taking over the lease from somebody else, and we managed it better, is we did make a lot of money, and it was great. However, we were working 70 hours a week. It was crazy. And we were hiring my parents' friends who were retired and just wanted to make extra cash. So from there, I did eventually get my undergrad, and then traveled to Australia, grad school, came and I lived in Toronto, and loved the big city. Could never live there, but lived there for 7 years. And this was around the time that Twitter started to get like pretty notable in the business space. And I was one of the first, like, quote, influencers, you could say, in Toronto. Was nominated by Virgin America as one of the top 10 Twitter influencers in Toronto. And so in this time, and this is like going to go back to the story, we're going to come back to the story that I don't often share, but it's just hilarious. Companies were coming to me to ask, how can we leverage this new platform for our business? No one really knew how to do it. And so we were figuring it out. And at the time, I was doing a lot of content marketing and now social media for companies. I was consulting with them and startups. And then I met this woman named Heather, who eventually became my business partner. And she was doing public relations for a ton of startups. I didn't know the space, but we were collaborating on a lot of projects. And it got to the point where I was like, hey, Heather, maybe we should go into business together. She said yes. And so now we created this company. At the time, it was called Onboardly, and we won awards, and we worked with some pretty awesome startups. And as we were kind of going through the motions of servicing our clients, we realized that there was a much larger ROI on doing PR than there was on the grunt work of social and content. And so we started to mostly move our service offering to being just PR. But here's the funny thing, and this is a story I do share often. is I ran this $1 million agency, having never pitched the media a day in my life. But I was capable of bringing in the team and having this unbiased, literally uneducated perspective of what it meant to actually do PR for a company on behalf of a company was our advantage, because it's like you're not coming in with old antiquated methods or philosophies or old ways of doing it. We just created ourselves. And the advantage for us was that we were working with a bunch of startups who had that same mentality and philosophy. It's like, get to the finish line as fast as possible, go, go, go. We felt the same way. And that's why we were such a great complement to tech startups. So in the time of starting that business, get this, when I asked Heather to be my business partner, I was 8 months pregnant with my first son. And I said, hey, Heather, let's go to business together. And she looked at me, she's like, but you're really pregnant. And my reply was, but babies just sleep all the time. We got this. To add the cherry to the top of the story, we launched this business. We grew to 4 employees. We had clients from South Africa to San Diego, and it was going pretty fast. I welcomed our second son 11 months after having my first son. Yeah. So we had Irish twins. And I say we because my business partner was equally involved in helping me with these children. She was amazing. And then we went through due diligence of being acquired. And at the end of the day, things kind of started to like crumble near the end. And I mean, we could talk about this too, if it's about value to your audience. And we ended up closing the doors. When one day I was completely burnt out. Like, this was the epitome of burnout. You talk about all of these health coaches out there that talk about burnout. I am the epitome of what happened. And so I took time off and I actually got into business coaching. And why I got into it was because my husband is in it and he's one of the world's top, if not the top SaaS coach in the world. And now he's one of the fastest growing business coaches in the world. And I was like, well, he makes it look really easy. So maybe I can do this business coaching thing. Turns out it wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to do. So on the back end of this, I'm an angel investor and I was doing PR for some of the companies that I was invested in. And then I was like, wait, I'm actually really good at this. Remember, never done PR before in my life, but I ran an agency that offered the services. Being in the thick of it, I realized I'm an artist. At the end of the day, I'm a creator, I'm an artist. I actually need to be writing, creating strategies and pitching. This is what I love to do. And so We Wild Women, as it stands today, is a PR agency. However, we've only been in operation for about 10 months now. And it's been such an incredible journey. So much fun. I love it. I love it. And we have officially reached our revenue targets for the year.
Can you tell me what those are?
So this year, as the time of this recording, we're at $250,000. That's
incredible.
In sales. And it's just me and
10 months in,
a part-time assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just finished polishing off some of our processes. So if we do what we did at the energetic level this year, next year, we can easily double that.
Of course.
Easily.
Okay. So you know what I love about you is you just do stuff. And what I've seen from your stories so far, even though you might not notice this, you started a restaurant with zero experience and you just made it happen. You started a PR company and you've never done PR in your life. And you had all these people coming to you. And I want to ask you, how were you getting those clients, by the way, when the Twitter age?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I never even thought about it this way. That is the great example of jump off and build your parachute on the way down.
Exactly.
Right?
And you're doing it again now because you just said energetically, we're just doing this. Okay. So do you see a trend here or did you miss that your whole life?
Totally missed it.
Okay.
It's the first time anyone has ever put a spotlight on that.
There you have it. It's so obvious. Okay. So that's your mojo. And you did say you're a risk taker. And now I see what you mean. Okay. So I love the fact that you did something and through your, I call that massive, messy action. I coach my clients on that. We are so in this world waiting to have so many certifications and be validated 1,000,000 times and have no FOMO and no, this imposter syndrome, which doesn't even exist. It's something that's non-existent. How could you be an imposter of your own life? Okay. But you are the opposite of that. You're like, I'm just going to do this. And it sounds like no offense, your ignorance of those markets actually served you.
Totally.
Because you didn't have the biases and the crustiness of, well, that's not going to work. So I dig what you're doing and I'm totally of your personality as well. Okay. So now We figured out that you knew nothing about restaurants, and at 17, you and your sister figured that out. Amazing. Whether you had people already, you still have to run a business, okay? And you employed your mom's and dad's friends. So you know, there's public service as well in there, okay? Then you started business with Heather. That crumbled. Do you want to, now I understand when you said you had a baby and another one, I thought she got burnt out because there's no way. I don't care how superwoman you are. That's just too much. So with you and Heather, you closed the doors. What happened there? I think that's a good business lesson.
So Heather, I don't want to throw her under the bus at all because she's an incredible human being. It was probably one of the worst heartbreaks of my life when she decided to leave the company.
Aww.
And there was a lot of like personal stuff that was happening in her life too, but she literally just signed over all the shares and walked away. And in my mind, I couldn't understand how somebody would want to walk away from something that was so lucrative. We were in the thick of due diligence of being acquired by another agency. And we were on the cusp of like saying yes or no, because we were looking at our sales projections over the next 3 years, saying, okay, we potentially could be making more revenue than what the earnout would be. So we were making this decision, which is the hugest compliment for any business, is when somebody wants to buy you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then, I mean, she had alluded to maybe leaving, and then finally one day she's like, I'm done, and walks away. And there's some other stuff that happened too, nothing to do with me.
Sure.
I was devastated. And in that time, in my mind, I was like, oh crap, I've never done PR before. Now I have to figure out how to do this. I know how to run the agency, but it was my team that was doing all the PR work anyway.
Yes.
I thought that they had more faith in her as a leader than they did in me. Turns out that wasn't the case. And then after she left and I kept the doors open and I was still running the business, I had people say to me, Renee, I'm shocked. I thought for sure you would close the doors like right away. And it was like a couple years later, eventually it happened. And so people were confirming of me what I thought of me, that I can't do this.
Confirming something that absolutely wasn't true.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I thought I can't do this. And other people were saying, I'm surprised you're still doing this. I didn't think you could do it either.
Right.
And I was like, is that a compliment or an insult?
No,
I don't know.
Very interesting. But that's the exact definition of limiting beliefs, is that you believe what other people limit you by. It's other people limit our beliefs, not ourselves. That was a classic move. So you still kept it open for 2 years.
Then eventually, so here's like, I say this quote and I actually don't believe it anymore. I used to say that you're not a true entrepreneur unless you've been sued. And it's when you get to a level in your business, it happens. It's happened to every single person I know that plays at a high game, high level. I got sued a year and a bit after Heather left for wrongful dismissal because I ended up letting go an employee who was extremely toxic to my company. I did it in a manner that was, I gave her more than she needed. I gave her all the grace and everything. Like there's really nothing more polished I could have done. Victims are victims. And she turned around and sued me. And what she sued me for was also ridiculous. However, at the end of the day, she didn't win. And here's why she didn't win. Out of integrity, I showed up with really, truly passionately who I am. There was no case for her. But at the end of the day, I would have gladly paid that money to not have those emotions and have to feel that depth of pain and anger and frustration.
Because that is so detrimental. It's not about the money.
So then what else? And I know there's like entrepreneurs on the line, new entrepreneurs listening. Here's the thing is this is just unique to me. It doesn't happen to everybody. What happened, I found out later, was that person who ended up suing me became the character reference for my ex-business partner's new business. So she was going behind the scenes, helping her elevate her profile, which to me is being like, I don't know. It's two-faced. And so, it is what it is. However,
that's a very nice way of putting it. Right.
Yeah. And it had nothing to do with me.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Right.
It had nothing to do with me.
So do you feel like it sounds like that's in the rearview mirror now? From what you're saying, I'm getting it now that you realize you listened to other people too much and cared too much about what other people thought of you.
100%.
I get it.
100%.
Right.
So then when I started this business, I dated 3 other potential female founders to come in and do business with me because in my mind, I believe the story that I couldn't do this myself.
Right.
And the first person was super invested and we did some work together, and last minute, here's the crazy thing about this, is that woman who was going to be 50-50 in this company was the CEO of the agency that was going to acquire my last agency, and she didn't even know.
Oh, wow.
What are the chances?
Yes.
So anyway, didn't work out. And then a couple other people too. And if you believe in God, spirit, whatever it is, these were signs saying you are supposed to do this as the leader alone.
Yes.
Have your team, but you don't need to be 50-50. So finally, I woke up one day. I'm like, this is me, all me. And I have the power, the compassion, and the tenacity to do this myself.
Yes. And that is a big issue, challenge, problem for many people, is they feel they need somebody else to piggyback on that person or somehow get them in their energy. They don't understand that you don't always have to have a partnership. And most of the partnerships that I've heard of, the majority did not work out. It is very hard to have a partnership because it's two human beings with wills. And if people could understand that most of the time, you don't need to have a partnership because you could do it on your own and just hire people. But I think it's the lack of confidence. And also they're hoping that the other partner is going to be carrying more weight for them. That's also a problem that you probably come across.
Well, for me too, is I doubted myself, but also Heather was such a perfect match. She was the strength to my weakness and vice versa. It was in my mind, such a power duo that what really hurt me the most was that now that's not there anymore. However, we already established our brand and the image and reputation in the industry at this point. But that's the part that was like the real gut wrencher. And we already had all the processes set up. Like our system was, or our business was like running pretty much by itself at this point.
But there's personal reasons, like you said, where people just want out, and it's not always about the money. It
was definitely not about them. No, it was about the freedom. It was about the freedom to pursue other ventures. I totally get it. There's no shame in this at all.
No.
It was just what she did wasn't wrong. It was how she did it that was wrong.
Got it. And you know what? Most people do things the wrong way, I've found. All right. Now you mentioned something, and thank you for sharing that, because it's really important for people to see that none of us had a completely smooth ride. None of us. And some of things happen. And you've got, as an entrepreneur, business person, you have to learn how to just sustain the highest level of chaos more than other people. That's what I figured out, that we have to develop a capacity to sustain more chaos than average people. That's what I figured out. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something when we were chatting beforehand, that the way you met your husband was quite funny. You want to share that story? Because I'm intrigued now.
I alluded to Twitter earlier, and that is actually how I met my husband. So this was in like 2000
He responded to one of your tweets?
Well, what happened was I was living in Toronto, and he's Canadian, but he was in San Francisco. And I was meeting a lot of great people on Twitter. And like this was the time when, and Twitter will never be this the way it was back then. It was like, it seemed like such a small pod of people that were, it's almost like a public, coffee chat with buddies, and people would chime in. And so I started meeting all these people that had really cool ideas, and my husband Dan was one of them. And I found out he was coming to Toronto at the time to speak at an event. And at the time was when I held my only corporate job in my life, and it was there for almost 2 years. And I was managing their small business blog, and I wanted to interview him. And he's like, yeah, for sure. Come meet me at this event. I'm speaking on this Monday, and we can chat. And so this was like Twitter to email. And that's how we met. And it's kind of how we stay connected afterwards. But when he came to Toronto, I was newly single and he asked me on a date, but he didn't think it was a date. Like, you don't ask to go on a date with a woman and bring her to the finest Italian restaurant and it not be a date.
What was it supposed to be? Just a nice dinner with a friend?
I'm like, dude, is this how you treat your friends? Like, this is crazy. But yes, it turned out to be a date. And then we got engaged a year later, and then had our babies before we got married. But yeah, it was like, and now we're just like married 8 years together, 13, still like madly in love, super supportive of each other. It's a fun journey. And here's the thing too, is like, we're both entrepreneurs. So we both totally understand each other's need to like he's away now traveling. He's doing a huge podcast tour and there's no asking permission. It's kind of like, here's the thing I need to do. I'm like, yeah, babe, you go. And I'll meet you wherever. And it turns out he's in Scottsdale. So next Wednesday, my kids and I are flying to Scottsdale to meet him.
Aw.
Like it's about, and you need, so talking about support and relationships is, I know there's a lot of people listening that are entrepreneurs and their significant other isn't. And it is very hard to have a person who doesn't have that entrepreneur mindset to understand what the other person needs to do.
Yes.
Because it's just a different way of looking at the world.
It is very different.
And both are beautiful. But when you have two entrepreneurial minds in the same household, conversations are different, support is different, and it is a little bit chaotic. However, it's fun.
Right.
So much fun.
Right. I find sometimes that people that are not entrepreneurial and they have a spouse that is, it's almost like there's this thing of they're giving them permission to be so. It's almost like tolerating it, you know? And that's not good. It's like, well, I'm going to tolerate that person not being the norm like me with a job. And I can see that would cause problems, but it sounds like you have a very wonderful relationship that's very creative and flourishing. So I congratulate you on that because it's huge.
It is huge. But here's the thing is what we discovered is what we do to be good leaders in our organizations, to grow our businesses, all the philosophies to create successful businesses can easily be applied at home. And that is an easy sell for a house full of entrepreneurs. But you can't sell that to somebody who's a 9-to-5er and leaves the office at 4:58 every day because they don't like their job.
Right.
They don't understand that concept.
Right.
But the point of it is to, as it's the cover of the title of my husband's book is called Buy Back Your Time, is how can you actually invest into services, platforms, people to get your time back so that you can actually have time to focus on the things that matter in your business and a personal life.
Right.
And we understand that philosophy is we apply business-like philosophies to our family life so that we maximize our free time with each other.
So you're hiring like people to do your laundry for you, and you're probably
delegating Betty full time in our house.
You're delegating every single thing you can do so you have maximum time.
Yeah, and you know what? The people we delegate it to, they love it. It is their zone of genius, and they're so good at it.
Right.
Like my assistant, Morgan, she's with me just over half time, and it's the first time, get this, the first time I really ever have an assistant dedicated to me. And at first I was like, hey, can you please do this for me? And like asking her permission.
Right.
She's like, it's my job for sure.
Yes.
And I realize now she loves the work that she does for me.
That is so funny.
Because it's not that I don't love, it's not that I don't love the work. It's just that I should not be doing it.
No, I don't love the work that my assistant Bella does. And I said, I got to fill this out. She goes, oh, I love doing this. And I said, let's get married. Because when you know what I mean? And I thought, wow, what a fit. She loves doing the things that I don't want to do and I shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. And I say the same thing. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, what are you talking about? I love filling out forms. I'm like, go for it. So that's a beautiful thing. I know what you're saying. I keep giving her more and more and more work that she loves. She goes, I thrive on all this. I said, that's beautiful things I can't stand. And we laugh about it. She cracks up and she goes, I know you hate doing that. She goes, give it to me. So that's a beautiful thing as well. Okay. You know what the funny thing is? Most entrepreneurs don't understand that. They're too married to extreme hustle. They're too married to doing everything themselves that they can't even see how beautiful that would be if they could let go of the control a bit and get somebody to do it. Even if that person's not doing it 100% as well, you're still winning. You're still winning.
Here's the thing I want to add to this is 80% is like your value of 80% is 100% done. So if somebody does something at 80%, it's actually 100% done.
Yes.
Most often than not, the person you're delegating it to ends up doing a way better job than you do anyway.
Sometimes not. But the rule is though, when you look at it as far as scaling a business, that even if someone is only doing the job that you could do at 100%, if they're doing it at 80%, you're still winning because you've saved so much time and okay, it's still done well enough. And this is not a mindset people have. The mindset is they have to do it exactly as well as me or I'm going to do it myself. And that's not reality. And you can't scale that way because your time is worth more than that 20%. And this is a concept a lot of people can't get their minds around. But you are correct. Sometimes they will do it at 100%. or even better.
Yeah, or 200%.
Maybe. Yeah.
Like I remember the first time I delegated my calendar, and I forgot that I had delegated my calendar in the sense where like use Gmail, you can do delegated access.
Yes.
So I remember one time she was CC'd on emails going back and forth, and she messaged me on Voxer, and she's like, "Hey, Renee, about that email, you actually have time on this day. I just checked her calendar." And I was like, like that moment that I forgot that she had access, that just opened up like a whole other universe.
Yeah, it's like, I have help. Actually, I have several people in my calendar, and they're just figuring it all out. And I see things pop up, and they know when I want buffers. And it's a beautiful thing when people tell you about your own calendar, and you do that. That happened to me too. It's like, you do have this space. Could you do it then? I thought, well, yeah. Okay, so we're on the same page as far as delegation. Now, I wanted to ask you, what is you've been very open about like not knowing anything about something and being a success. And I love that people hear that, because that should get rid of a lot of this imposter syndrome that people love subscribing to these days. Tell me, what is one thing as far as PR that you can share with people as an actual strategy or tactic that they can do themselves right now, that you are like, hey, this is a great thing. It works all the time and anybody can do it. Why don't we help people out a bit here and give them a little starter?
Okay. Before I answer that question, I want to ask you a question because I forget. How did we connect again?
We connected through somebody else. And I think that she referred you to be on my podcast.
Okay. See, that's magical. And how do you think that happened?
Well, it happened because my assistant, who's great at sourcing podcast guests, we look at a lot of different things, she found somebody and she was on. And then what I say every single time is, do you have 3 other people that would also be good for my podcast? And you were one of those names.
So the reason why I'm asking you these questions, it's because it is the number one foundation for public relations. People are going to think, oh, it's the press release, it's your media list. It is getting in the room. However you need to get in the room. And what I mean by that is expand your network, go to events, speak on stages, get in the room, because COVID taught us one thing, is that the intimacy of being physically in the same room as somebody else is more meaningful than anything else. And it could mean get in the room. Like I speak in people's coaching programs all the time, which by default gets me probably a handful of clients. So getting in the room is like, what are the events that I can be attending even as an attendee and go and rub shoulders with some people and introduce yourself.
Right.
That is the most important thing. I had somebody say to me once, because I managed getting a couple clients on some notable podcast, oh, you only got them on those shows because you were introduced from your husband, or your husband knows these people. And I said, so what? They're still on the show.
Exactly.
Who cares how they got there?
I love your answer. So what? Yeah. So what?
It's like they're on the show.
Who cares?
They wouldn't have gone on that show if it wasn't for me anyway, because my husband wasn't going to do that for them.
Right.
Here's what we all know. When it comes to PR, public relations is the mother of all marketing because it is about building relationships. I urge everybody to open up their Facebook or Instagram and look at the closest people that they interact with the most. Have we at all asked these people about anything with our business? Hey, Jean, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Does it make sense to maybe have like Lisa on my show? I feel like she'd be a good fit. That is relationship building. It is PR. It's about growing and expanding that network, because everything in life becomes substantially easier when you have the right people in your court.
Absolutely.
And most people don't actually make the effort to do it. For instance, I have a very notable client. She's one of the top TikTok influencers. And I have a duty to get her on 8 very large podcasts. These are like top in the world podcasts. We're having a little bit of a problem of finding the right person to contact on some of these shows. Happened to be at an event in California the other week. And at the event, there was a social hour by the pool. And I was sitting next to this gentleman. Again, God works in mysterious ways, who happens to be the manager for my client's best friend.
Okay. So that's synchronicity, but I believe that we put ourselves in situations where that can happen.
If you don't go in the room, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
If I didn't go to the pool that day, even though I was like, I'm just going to stay in the room and work. I'm like, nope, I'll go by the pool. At the end of the conversation, explaining to each other kind of how we work and how the whole process is, he turns to me, Renee, if you need any help with anything, just let me know. Sweet. I often don't take people up on their offer. It was a week later. I emailed this guy. I was like, I am struggling with these. I have a tiny list. Does your team happen to have connections with these? Is there any way you can make an intro? I know it's a huge ask, no pressure, and he goes, absolutely, send over the list and I'll get my team on it. Like that. If we're not in the room, we can't ask the questions. And if you're in the room, you're not asking the questions, then what's the point of being in the room? So the secret to PR is show up.
Right.
Look at your local events, other like networking events. It's like, just, you'll see. And it just snowballs from there. And like the more people that know you genuinely, the more people that know your expertise and who you service, they'll be in another room where they're like, hey, Lisa, Jane, do you happen to know a PR expert? And they're like, actually, Renee does that.
Right.
I just met her. She was wonderful. She was on a podcast. I'll make the intro. That's PR.
Right. There's also intention as well, energetically, that you had on your radar. You had this problem to solve. So it's somewhere right front and center. You're walking around with the intention somewhere in your brain. I have this problem to solve on my hands. I have this problem to solve, and it's there, right? It's there. It's there in your mind. Because it's there, then you walk into the right room and your intention subconsciously is now matching up with your reality. And you somehow did attract that, right?
And you know what else works too? This is totally Mel Robbins stuff, but I added a twist to this, is she tells you to like high five yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
But instead, I look in the mirror on those moments where I'm like, I feel defeated and I'm talking to the younger version of myself. Like the 17-year-old version of Renee. I'm like, it looks stupid. Renee, oh my gosh, you got this. It's tough. It sucks. It's 70-hour weeks, but at the other end of it, so good. And then in the next moment, I put my hands up to the sky. If I'm outside, it's the sky. If it's inside, I'm looking at the window and I'm like, God, give me the guidance to get through this, or like, what's the next move? And it might not be immediate. It could be the next day. It could be a year from now.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. If you put that intention out there, it floats around until it lands on somebody.
Well, they said, what is it? Let go and let God. You're praying, you're praying. That's also pretty powerful, right? Now, it's funny that I didn't know about the Mel Robbins high five. I do something where I say, I'm the greatest. Okay. I am the greatest. It's a mantra. I am the greatest. And I realized when I started doing that, because a mindset coach he actually owns the Think and Grow Rich Institute. I said, that's it. That's the coaching. And there's some other stuff. He goes, Jean, this works. He said, because when you start saying I am the greatest over and over again, your energy does shift, like you feel it. Because nobody does that. Because we're always thinking, well, maybe I'm not the greatest. And isn't that big-headed? He said, stop it. You're the greatest at what you do, and everybody else is also the greatest. And I realized why Muhammad Ali used to say that. That was his whole thing, I am the greatest. His coach told him to say that, and it worked because he did become the greatest. So the high five is kind of like on the same thing as you're the greatest. Listen, Renee, this has been amazing. Is there anything that you would like to close off the show with, some wisdom?
Yeah, well, oh my gosh, so much wisdom. Let's go back to the theme of my life that you happen to uncover for me is you don't have to know how to do it all to just start.
Right.
And I actually like pointing at my drum kit next to me. I have drums right next to me, and I don't know how to play drums. I just have some classes and I jump on every now and then. I started a restaurant without knowing what to do. I started a PR agency without knowing what to do. If you're really intentional about being successful in something, you will figure it out. And this is what I love. And what I'm learning about myself too, is if I buy, for example, like a new piece of furniture and there's instructions to put it together, and there's two of them. Nightstands would be a perfect example. If I open it up and I'm like, I look at it, I can figure this out without looking at instructions, I will do that.
Right.
I hate reading the instructions.
So do I.
And if it requires instructions, I will do the first one a little bit slower and more intentional so that I don't have to look at the instructions for the second.
Again, it was a factory.
I would rather dismantle something to learn that I did it wrong than to have to read the instructions. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of my life.
I do the same thing. I get the instructions and I grow and I go, oh, okay. And I say, what can I do without the instructions? And then I'll tell one of my daughters now, I say, you look at the instructions for me. Now I have help. But I will literally, I hate forms and instructions, as you figured out by my conversation about Bella. Okay, well, that is very much tied into my philosophy that the solution and the remedy to everything is taking one step. That's my philosophy of life, is the remedy for everything is taking one step. foot in the door. You have one step. It's kind of like what you said in a different way, right?
Yeah, but also to like add to that is to be fully committed to that step though. Like
Absolutely.
it's a very scary first step, but
Yeah.
you have to do it with integrity
Mm-hmm.
and intention, or else it's just going to be, they can just kind of turn around and walk away. You don't want that. You got to just commit.
Right. Now, I think what you said, we were going to close off. This has been such a great conversation. That thing of very scary, it doesn't have to be. If we don't subscribe to the very scary, because nobody's going to come and kill us. So if they're not going to come and kill us, it's probably not that scary, right? And I feel like
But if it feels like you could die.
you could die.
It does.
But we need to, I believe, really master that emotion of what really actually is scary and what we perceive as scary, right? So anyway, we'll finish up on that. But I do want to say in the show notes, we have links to Renée's program, Authority Business. What was the end of it?
Authority Booster Intensive.
That was it. Authority Booster. I'm so sorry. I messed that one up. And also, of course, we'll have linked to her website if you're looking for amazing PR. Thank you, Renée, for turning up. This has been a delight. And I thank all of you for listening. Take care. Bye. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Business Wealth Impact. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and life-changing. If you want to support the show and stay up to date with all of our latest episodes, the easiest way to do that is by following us on your favorite podcast platform. Just hit that follow button to never miss an episode. And if you really love the show and want to help us spread the word, leave us a review and share the podcast with your friends. Again, be sure to subscribe, and until next time, be impactful.